Awesome. All right. We'll wait for everybody to take their seats. No pushing anybody. There's plenty of room. I made sure to put out plenty of chairs for everyone. Hello, welcome, welcome. As everybody's filing in, I will just do a quick spiel before I disappear into the void. Hi, everybody. I'm Nat, and I'm one of the representatives of the kind of RoberCon group, the RoberCon event planning committee. Thank you all for coming to this RoberCon pop-up panel. Since we can't meet for our big RoberCon convention this year, we're trying to bridge the gap between all of us by holding these pop-up events where we can all gather as a community and geek out. So thank you to tonight's panelists for coming to discuss Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You can type your questions in the chat for the panelists. And if you're looking for more amazing events, please be sure to check out robercon.org. We're always adding more. And without further ado, I will hand it off to the panel.
Thank you, Natalie. And welcome, everybody. It's great to be here. It's great to have you being a part of this panel. We just finished an amazing Disney Plus show last Friday. The Falcon and the Soldier wrapped up their 6 episodes, and we really wanted to get together like this and spend some time talking about it, our impressions, our thoughts. It was an amazing series, and it went in places I think a lot of people really didn't expect. But before we start talking, I wanted to take some time and have our panelists introduce themselves. So my name is Paul Smith. I have been a fan of Marvel Comics since I was young. I remember reading some of the source material that this series was based on when it was originally coming out in comics. So, you know, that kind of dates myself, but I'm a huge fan, and I love these characters, and I love what Marvel is doing with the characters on screen. So I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to kind of go around my Brady Bunch window here. I'll start with Crystal. So if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you know, your experience with these characters, their history, how long have you been a fan, that sort of thing.
I'm Crystal. I'm actually one of the original RoberCon coordinators from way back, and have been an MCU fan, not so much with the comics. I grew up with the X-Men. I was in the other universe, unfortunately. But I've really been in love with the MC universe, you know, since the movies came out, and have been so blown away by the writing, not only with WandaVision, but especially with this, that I basically told Chris and Natalie that they had no choice but to put me on the panel.
That's great. And Adara.
Hi, I'm Adara Alston. I got into Marvel Comics probably back during the actual cartoon in comic days. I'm a Spider-Man fan, or at least that was one of my entry points. Big X-Men, and have seen all those series of movies, and I've seen probably a majority of the Marvel, the MCU movies, but I actually am not a Captain America person. And this, aside from his appearances in the other parts of the series, this is probably the most, though it doesn't actually include the Steve part, this is probably the most I've been involved with the Captain America. Now, I'll get more into why later, but if you watch the series, it was a bit eye-opening for me, because it spoke to how I felt about Captain America and kind of my this hesitancy in maybe watching those movies.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Thaddeus.
My name is Thaddeus Howze. I am known as the Answer Man. I have been reading comics pretty much since comics came into my life. I probably was 5 or 6. I found some comics from one of my cousins. Ironically, Captain America was one of those first comics. And so I've been reading comics since then, and I make a thing. It's a thing I do. I answer questions online about superheroes, mostly because I remember all that stuff, and I enjoy it at a level that most people are only suddenly beginning to feel the enthusiasm for. You know, they've had 20 years of or 10 years of Marvel, like, wow, Marvel's great. I'm like, this was the B team. The Avengers were the B team. They're not the A team. The A team were the X-Men. And you see what those turned into. So, you know, I've been following this stuff all my life. And so I read DC, Marvel, Image. If someone makes a comic about it, I probably read it. And I collect universes like most people collect baseball cards. So that's what I do.
That's great. Thank you. And Jarvis.
Hey, Jarvis.
Hey, Jarvis, you're still on mute.
Unmute. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Jarvis Sheffield. I'm the coordinator of the Media Centers for Historic Tennessee State University. I'm also the director of the diversity track with DragonCon, and I'm the founder of Black Science Fiction Society. And I've been a fan of Marvel Comics and DC Comics and any comic I can get my hand on since I was a kid. And I like to tell people I was saved by comic books. You're looking at someone that was in the slow class in reading in elementary school. I had to be taken out of regular class and given supplemental education until I started reading comics with my cousin. We would collect comics and compare them. And guess what? That means you have to read. And so we would always talk about comics and everything. And so I would read every comic I could get my hands on. One that was particular that we used to love to share was Marvel Universe, which had every character in the Marvel Universe, their history and all of that. So that cultivated my my reading. And so I like to tell people comic books or it's not just fun and games. It actually was a gateway drug for me to get into reading.
Wow. That's great. Thank you. So I wanted to just jump right in and start talking about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and what were our initial reactions. Just looking for maybe some popcorn style answers here. What do you think? Anybody can chime in at any time.
Well, I loved it. The only thing that I didn't like about it was that Sam didn't have his telepathy like in the comic books. In the comic books, he had a real Falcon, and he had a telepathic connection with that Falcon. So outside of that one little micro thing, I loved the series. It was well written and very well executed.
How about somebody else?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Getting back to my earlier point. Part of the reason why I watched the series, I don't know too much. The Falcon is one a character I wasn't as familiar with, other than his part in the series, in the movies, and it was interesting to learn more about the character. I didn't realize how deep the series would get. I found that quite interesting, and we'll get into that a bit more. I was more expecting the kind of typical, obviously Marvel and how they deal with impact and issues, and some of the metaphors for how they experience some of the underdog or biases and racism and things like that are always incorporated. But this was a lot more outward and open and very clear as far as the connection, the ties, and the real conversations that can come from the content that was happening in the context of a superhero series, and I really enjoyed it, and it related to a lot of things I can relate to. Even the writing and the moments where they would be a bit more, when he was with Sarah, and those moments that were very believable in how he would talk with her and their family, and the issues that they went through with the bank and the problems on the street with getting pulled up, being addressed by an officer and all those different things. Like, there were so many relatable, real moments in the series with the backdrop of it being a superhero series, which was quite interesting for me.
Thaddeus or Crystal, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I have always really, through the movies, really been interested in the character of Sam. I thought that he was really underutilized in a lot of ways through the movies. And so when it came that there was going to be series kind of focusing around him, I was really excited. I also very much loved the the heroes won and everything is not okay aspect. I thought the writing on that was very telling and answered a lot of questions, even if it was answered uncomfortably for some people, about what reality is for our superheroes, and what life was like in the world after, you know, everybody came back from being dust. So I thought there were just an incredible amount of layers to this, to speak to different people about different things, and that there was something for each of us to take away and think about.
Absolutely.
I liked it and I hated it, and that's pretty much the par for the course for me, because the parts I liked were Sam becoming Captain America. Of course, I like that part because I disagree with the premise that a black man cannot represent America. I know that Isaiah Bradley had issues with that, and he felt that Sam was selling himself short to represent America, but I don't believe that it has to be that way. I believe that Captain America is a conceptual thing. And in 1940, Steve Rogers was that plucky kid who wanted to fight for America for the right reasons, and yet had no capacity to do so. And so, as in the stories of that period, there was wish fulfillment. He gets to be exposed to an opportunity that makes him ideal. He was the ideal superhuman. And there is something to be said for the Falcon, who is the exact opposite. He has no superpowers. And even the superpowers he has in the comics, they were not originally his. They were given to him by the Cosmic Cube, just to show you that Sam has never really had any powers. And Hawkeye, you know, ironically, Hawkeye gets replaced. The Avengers have a quota put on them by the government, and Hawkeye gets replaced by the Falcon. And it's a diversity placement. And Hawkeye says, well, what's this guy's power? He flies and he raps with birds. Why is he better than me? And the answer to that question is he wasn't. It was literally a question of diversity. So we watched Sam for decades fight this fight. So when he gets the opportunity to become Captain America and he says no, you're like, can I agree with him? And then Isaiah Bradley speaks, and my God, Isaiah Bradley was magnificent. Carl Lumley just 100% awesome. And he says what he says, and I had to be like, you know what, you're right. A black man cannot represent America. And then I went back later, and when it ended and he is Captain America, I had to retract that and say, yes, Sam can be Captain America, because technically Captain America is an ideal that changes. It should change. It should have different representatives. And Sam is the modern representative of Captain America, which is, I'm human just like you. I don't have any superpowers. I live and die. I'm just as afraid of everything going on in the world as you are. I don't have any God powers to save me. And so I'm representing you. We are one. And yeah, I use technology, but so do you. We all use technology. Technology is literally the lingua franca of humanity now. So Sam represents us, and he is representing the better America. The America that says we recognize brown people, we recognize minority people, and we believe they are as good as anybody else. And that was a message I did not expect Marvel to send. So it was kind of interesting. And so I did not hate that part. But I hate it were the villains, and we can talk about that later. Back to you.
Well, thank you.
You know, and I want to talk the point about Captain America being represented by any man, and that concept. I think that was always the hard part for me to grasp, because I like Spider-Man, because it's this dorky kid who gets bit by a spider who has all these powers. The X-Men, who are these mutants, who are outcasts, who have these abilities. Those types of, you know, those things, I connect with superheroes in that way, and that's what makes me want to watch the movies. And to have Sam in this, even if it doesn't match the comics and it's not identical, I identified with the way they told the story to get me to connect with this idea of this man in this time and this space being Captain America.
Yeah. So we've already brought up the topic of just the many layers that this show tackled. So many different topics. It's almost hard to list them, but I'm curious as to know what stood out to you. What were those unexpected places that this show went? I'll start with Jarvis.
Oh, There were quite a few of them, really. One that stuck out with me was how they dealt with the real world consequences of everyone returning back, in terms of, people having refugees around the entire planet. Sam not and his sister not having any 5 years of of credit because you were gone 5 years. It was like the real human aspect that they showed and displayed within the interpersonal relationships between the family members. That was really what stuck out for me, the interpersonal, the writing. It wasn't just a lot of foo-foo action all the time. Of course, you had the great action, but you had the comedy, you had those interpersonal dialogue conversations that I didn't anticipate those in this film, especially coming off of WandaVision.
Crystal, you mentioned that the layers stood out to you as well. What really stood out to you?
There was, there was a lot. A couple that I'll mention specifically, that they drew on Sam's experience and wisdom as a counselor, dealing with his experience with veterans, with working with those people. I thought that there were, I think it was the second to last episode where we had a battle, but then the rest of this were basically people talking through their conflicts and trying to work that out without violence and trying to see each other. So that was important to me. And then I was kind of blown away by Bucky's apology to Sam, in that I think it touched on this issue where well-meaning people want to say, oh, I'm colorblind, and how dangerous and how hurtful that can be. And I think Bucky's apology that, oh, me and Steve, because it seems like they had a conversation that Sam was going to, get the shield off screen. And I think that their conversation, and not even thinking about what handing the shield to Sam would mean on layers that they couldn't experience, on levels that they couldn't experience. I thought that was a good moment for conversation, a good moment to take that away, and for those allies and different people to just, again, stop and think about, it's not just being able to say, oh, we didn't think about the fact that you're Black and that you're going to have this experience and that your experience is going to be completely different. And that's on us.
Adara, did you want to touch more on the layers?
A bit. There's so many, but just a couple. Carly as a character, I found her quite interesting. This youthful person, even the moment of introduction where it's like she's a hostage because she's so young, but she was leading this kind of resistance, and the defining of what is the good side and what is the bad side, and all those gray areas. Because a lot of things that you may resist may be, not to get too into, but certain things throughout history have been legal that weren't necessarily good, if you look at it. And the people that we now look back upon as heroes were viewed as villains back during those times because they were, breaking laws. So just Carly being this kind of youth movement of this idea and trying to, in her mind, and if you look at the overall potentially good reason, she wasn't the clear villain. She wasn't clearly on the side of evil. She was in that gray area of doing things for the right reasons, based on other things, but those things still have impact. Some other things also, thinking about now U.S. agent John Walker and his portrayal and his being kind of wooed into the side of what the serum can do, and having to deal with just being a regular Captain America who doesn't have those abilities, but wanting to be have be more of a super soldier and have those powers that are associated with that. And just kind of that dynamic of being a representative of what America is for the government, but going deep into that, and then having that reaction of when he's standing before them as like, you made me, and those kinds of moments of what that is, and him representing the good side, and him having being the person that ends up taking the spot that Sam was kind of being put into, or would have been put into, and what that represents, and this bigger story that that's telling.
Sure.
There are lots of layers in this series. I mean, literally every character is a prism. Every time you see them, you're seeing some aspect of them in a way you didn't see them before. And every character is morally challenged. There is nobody here who is good. Nobody. Everybody does what they do, trying to understand where they stand in the overall scheme of things. I mean, here's what I wrote in an essay. I said, the problem with the post-snap world is that we never really see the average guy on the street. In the post-snap Marvel universe, every living person on Earth has knowledge we on Earth do not currently possess. The number one knowledge they possess is that they are not alone in the universe. They are not alone. Wait, they don't have to wonder. We don't have to guess. We have seen them. They came here in the light of day to conquer the Earth. We watched the Avengers fight. People on the ground lived and died. And when this was over, every person on Earth knew aliens existed. Not only did they know aliens existed, but they know that superior alien technology existed. How superior? Such that they could erase half the human race just like that. Every person that lives in the Marvel universe is terrified all the time. And I know that's weird to say, but it explains why the Flag Smashers could be this thing they were. Everyone on Earth, just half the people on Earth vanished. And everybody in the world said, wow, we're screwed. So what do we do to get things back on track? And their solution was, let's get rid of the borders. And you know what? That's brilliant. It literally is brilliant. When the whole world is struggling, we dissolve borders, we work together. We are one world, one people. It makes perfectly good sense. And then all those people come back. And all the nations in the world thinking, well, the only thing that we've ever had that worked was that stuff that went before. So we should go back to that. And personally, I think it was a mistake. I actually agree with the Flag Smashers. Not with the murdering part. Murdering bad. People shouldn't murder. Don't murder kids. But I can agree that what they were wanting was worth pursuing. I just don't agree the way they went to do it. And I don't believe that Walker's response was the right response. But ironically, Walker, too, is another one of those layered individuals that, though he was a hero, he should not have been Captain America. He had the skill set to be Warrior America, but not Captain America if you're trying to represent people. If you're representing Warrior Nation, the United States, U.S. agent is that man. But Captain America should be talking about what we need, what we want, and that's the failure. But it was brilliantly prismed throughout this entire series. Nobody was all good or all bad, and we all questioned everything, and I think that's what makes this series work. It makes you sit where you are and go, what do I really think about this now that I'm actually presented with it? That's why it was awesome.
So we've had a couple questions in the chat to talk about both Sam's and Bucky's journey from their first appearance in Captain America 2 to the end of the series. Fortunately, that's on our agenda to talk about, so let's just jump right to that. Yeah, let's talk. Well, we've been talking about Sam. Let's talk about his journey. He first appeared in Captain America: The Winter Soldier as jogging around where the Washington Monument is up till today. So yeah, how has he grown? How has he changed? And I think we already touched on this, is how did this series give him the spotlight that he really needed to have to grow as a character? Crystal, do you want to start?
No, but I will. I think part of this is just the freedom within, this particular, 6-part series that we got to explore the characters. People go to, this is not, getting into the metaphysical layers, but just, from a practical point of view, you can't explore that within the movies because people are showing up to eat their popcorn and watch giant battles and, laugh, and that's it. But this is why I was so excited to see these series coming along, because these are the characters that really are deserving of that development, of deserving of digging into that. And I think his growth, it felt so organic to me. It felt so real to me. It didn't feel like an origin story. It just felt like the story of Sam, if that makes any sense. He didn't get the serum. He didn't get bit by a spider. He didn't have all these massive changes. Sam, at the end of this series, is the Sam we had in the beginning in terms of who he is as a person. And we just happen to see him grow through the situations that he's put in. But he was not changed from the outside. This is who he is. And I kind of love that.
Yeah, just to, go ahead. Sorry, Paul. I was just going to follow what Crystal said, as far as it felt like a moment in time. Not, there weren't flashbacks. There weren't a lot of times when you get these moments where a movie or a series are explaining a character, they really dive into the pieces that made them who they are. But you still found out who he was. You still felt who he was. The moments with the counselor elements, and the moments with the sister, and seeing those struggles and tapping into how he is as an uncle, and having the end scene with the cookout and getting that familial vibe of what that is. You felt like you got to know him and you got to see the way he works, but it was very organic. And I really like that. And I didn't know much at all about Sam. I haven't seen his journey in the comics, and certainly haven't seen much from the movies. So it was really nice for me. And now he went from not knowing much to being now. I'm very interested to see his journey as Captain America and what that is, even if it's short and there's someone else who's at the end of that journey. But I really like Sam from this series.
I think a person coming from the comic book realm, and I kind of straddle both. I love both the comics and the movies. And if you read the comics, you kind of saw this coming. And so when they first came out, when he first appeared on screen, you were like, wow, great. He might have his chance. And so between the first, how many movies are he in? 7? This is he was in 6 or 7 movies.
Yeah.
You got to kind of see him pay his dues, so to speak, and get to know him. And like I said, if you read the comics, you saw it coming, and for that to be put on screen on the show, and then have that whole series to kind of flesh out the details and see him come from point A to this epitome here, it was just fantastic. I think it was fantastic. And I've been waiting for it since I first saw him appear on that first Marvel film.
Any thoughts, Thaddeus?
Quite honest, I didn't expect Sam to ever become Captain America in the movies. Because, I'm not just being cruel. 4 or 5 years ago, there was a Captain America, Sam Wilson, there was a comic called Captain America, Sam Wilson, and Steve Rogers has gotten old, loss of the super soldier serum. He's weak, he's feeble, and they need to give somebody the role of Captain America. And so they give it to Sam. And of course, the question is, can Sam represent America? And in the comics, like they do here in this series, they make Sam about America, about the people of America. He is answering calls from people in social media, and he's getting dogged in social media. Matter of fact, he's dogged everywhere. He's always being dogged by somebody. So when I saw him becoming Captain America, matter of fact, when Sam first hit the screen, I was in love, because the Exo 7 armor that he uses, outstanding. Great technology, works great. But when you really got to watch it, you got to watch it in The Winter Soldier. Sam is magnificent. People, some guy wrote an article saying Sam Wilson can't fight. And I'm like, you are obviously not watching the same movies I watch, because in Captain America and the Winter Soldier, we have a normal guy hanging out with who? The Avengers. You remember them. Big green guy, Storm God, Mr. Technology, giant shrinking man, psychic powers. We have everything. And what Sam got? He's got an exoskeleton. And yet Sam delivers every time he meets anybody. He may not beat you, but you won't get bored kicking his ass. And Sam, Sam brings it. And I love that about him. So watching Sam develop in the MCU has been a treat, because by the time we now see him heading toward the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I'm like, yes, it is time. Sam Wilson, basically, if you watch any of the Avengers movies, he gets like that much screen time. Just go back and check it out. You know, he's not fighting, he's not doing anything else. So we get to see Sam, and we get to talk to Sam, and we get to walk with Sam, and we get to see Sam's friends and family, and we get to see Sam do something besides fight people. And Sam is really smart. He is a negotiator. He's clever. He's emotional. He's connected. He doesn't want to just solve problems. He wants to evolve problems, make them evolve into something less problematic. And that's something the Avengers were really bad at doing. They were great at avenging, but they were not so good at proactively solving problems. Every time they ever tried that, it went horribly, horribly wrong. But it wasn't that they didn't mean right. It just, their problems were too big and their solutions too linear. So they were always struggling. And that's why Walker, who followed the Avengers protocol, think about it. Walker's, whenever he had a problem to be solved, what did he do? He ran right at it. That's how the Avengers solve problems. But unfortunately, in this particular instance, with people as the foils, the Avengers solution probably isn't the right one. Sam's was. And that's why Sam did such a great job in his character evolution. He starts off as pure action, almost no dialogue at all, to being a person who actually is shown to be thoughtful, significant, loving, generous, empathetic, and still a great Avenger. And that's how great this transition is. So I love MCU's Falcon. Even though he has no powers, I would kill for a brother with some superpowers. But despite that, he still represents very well.
And if I can just tag on to that, I mean, that strength is his humanity, and the fact that he doesn't have all those powers like the Avengers who just charge in. He's used to having to work through conflicts without, throwing lightning at somebody or different things, and that we drew on those aspects of him so many times. Just to say, I agree with everything you just said.
Mhm.
So same kind of questions about Bucky. I mean, we haven't talked about Bucky yet. His journey started in the same movie that Sam did. And one thing I'd be curious to hear from you as you talk about Bucky is, by the end of this series, does the Winter Soldier even still exist? So anybody who wants to, Jarvis, why don't you go ahead and get us started on that?
Okay, just like with Sam, you got to see a transformation from him being this cold hard killer with no remorse, of course, due to his programming, to a person that has feelings and thoughts. You got to even see him break down at one point about the things that he's done. He actually, you had no idea that he had remorse and that he was having nightmares because of the things that he'd done. And the fact that he was written to not only feel bad about it, but he actually went back to try to correct some of the wrongs that he was doing. So moving him from cold hard killer to an actual real hero was a great opportunity to see.
Yeah. Who wants to go next?
I think for me, in some ways, Bucky's journey is just a demonstration of the work you have to do on yourself, with yourself, to really change those things. It's not just a matter of being able to decide one day that, oh, I'm not gonna, be a homicidal maniac killer anymore, whatever. But to actually go through the therapy even when you don't believe in it, to sit there and do the work even when you don't believe with it, to have those really hard and uncomfortable conversations like, we saw him going back to do at the end. And also listening to people who are looking at him. We had that moment with Sam looking at him, and it's like, just shut up and do the work. You're not doing it. You're ignoring everything, and you're not going to achieve this healing. You're not going to cross those names off unless you put the time in. I think that was a really, really important arc for people to see and to take away from. And of course, we've got, cool Uncle Bucky by the end of it, just being a real person. So do the work, I think, was so important to come out of that.
Yeah, I think Crystal, you pretty much said what I was thinking. There's the moment where Sam, I can't remember the exact quote, him about not doing the work. It said, you know, you're avenging. You're not actually remedying anything with what you're doing, and the perspective that then gave Bucky to go back and actually change the way that his perspective on things and what it really meant for him to actually change the impact and showing people his remorse and how he felt. And that's a pretty big, it's a very real in a you know, comic world context application of when you've done wrong, how you do the work to help. You can't change that man's never going to get his son back, but you can put in the work to more than just be a symbol of I care, but actually doing the work to get to be effective.
The Winter Soldier is a metaphor. It is a metaphor for the idea that every soldier that's ever gone to war has been trained to do that job, to go out into the world, fight because your country tells you to, kill other people who are just like you for the reasons that you as the soldier do not pay attention to. And when you are done, you're expected to come home and act as if nothing has changed. But the truth of the matter is, if you've ever served, you can never go back home. Wherever you are when you finish your service, that's where you are. And the Winter Soldier is that metaphor. He is saying, for 80 years, a guy who was basically sent out as a mascot, he was sent out to hang out with Captain America as a sidekick. And he eventually gets killed saving the day. This guilt is the soldier's lament, literally, that soldiers die doing the right things for the right reasons, and we never acknowledge it. And so when Bucky disappears, that's Cap's greatest moment of guilt. And it's the thing he carries with him into the present, even after he wakes up from the ice. The Winter Soldier, however, is now just further weaponized. He was a mascot, now he's a tool, and now he's a living, immortal tool. He's been given a treatment that as long as they put him on ice, he will live forever. He will survive administration. So every administration knows when they change, you got one of these. This is the Winter Soldier. When you have to kill someone that is a problem for your government, this is the guy you call. He has only failed once in 80 years. One time. That's a scary thing. That makes Bucky's return to humanity nothing less than miraculous. He's a miracle because he accepts what he was. He doesn't like it. I think part of the time he spent in Wakanda was formative. It changed his perspective of what was possible. And once he saw that the world was so different than the one he went to bed all those 80 years ago in, he realizes he can change and he wants to change. And the thing I love about this series was that Bucky doesn't just change, Bucky experiences responsibility, response to his abilities. He changes and grasps the responsibility of making right all those wrongs. And he has a book of wrongs. And for Bucky, that was just world-shattering, world-changing. So of all the heroes in the MCU, only he and Sam have had such marked transformations. I like WandaVision. Wanda was good, but I don't think Wanda changed all that much. I think Wanda just grew more powerful. As a character, I don't feel a burning sense of remorse. I watched WandaVision. At the end of it, girlfriend was like, well, yeah, this is awful. Peace. I'm out. No, really. I mean, really, she didn't say I can make restitution. I could erase your memory. She didn't do anything. She just said, this was terrible. You can't leave. And I'm out of here. And she retired to the mountains, and we don't know she's doing, sitting around reading the Darkhold. So has she gotten better? No, Wanda's gotten worse. So that's why Sam's and Bucky's transformations as characters are just amazing and totally worth watching. Even though I felt like that series should have been 8 episodes, I will settle for 6 if it builds a better universe. And so far, it's done that. It's given me a universe that I look at and go, I can't wait to see what they do next.
Right.
So we mentioned also for me, a character that was surprising that I really didn't think they were going to fold into the series, and that was Isaiah Bradley. And he played such a huge role in Sam's journey and even Bucky's journey too. So, some of us here know the comics better than others, know Isaiah Bradley, the comic side of him, but what did you see as his role in this series, or how did his influence kind of affect you and how you perceived the narrative of the story? And anybody who wants to start can start.
I'll start. Oh, go ahead, Jarvis. Sorry.
Oh no, ladies first.
Um, it's so hard to consolidate it into a single coherent thought, but for me, it was such a tie because once he was introduced, it was interesting how they framed it, because he was introduced relatively early. And you had that thought of the impact that it was having on Sam. And Sarah has moments she's like, you're gonna let Isaiah Bradley stay in your head, or affect what you're doing. It stayed with Sam. And then there was the big, I think maybe the 5th episode or so, when it has the moment where he talks about basically a comparison to like the Tuskegee experiments and that level of impact, where this man who wasn't being told but was being injected with and ended up a super soldier and was tested on for 30 years, and the impact of what that meant, and his speeches to Sam about a black man can never be Captain America, and if he did, you would have trouble getting support from black people because they wouldn't want to see it, and those types of things, not only as a person of what Isaiah Bradley went through himself, but then how it ties and impacts Sam throughout, and even having that moment where he acknowledges when Sam's on TV and takes over Captain America in that freaking awesome outfit, costume, to be revealed, and that the kind of the nod of, all right, that's what it is. After his speech, and then just the big, and not to steal what everybody else is going to talk about, but just the moment at the end, I know I cried. I know other people did when they had that "give them flowers while they're here" moment with Isaiah Bradley. That was perfection. And it was a great way that they still had the little bit of moment at the end, but that was really, I mean, it could have, for me, that was like the culmination, the giving the credit for what he went through so that Sam can now be Captain America. Those types of things that tie together was very nice.
All right, that was awesome. Coming from the comic books realm of reading the different comics, I was completely ecstatic with seeing Isaiah Bradley. He was originally in a comic called Truth, which was a limited series that told his story, and also watching the movie, or excuse me, watching the show, you got a chance to see his grandson, who eventually becomes Patriot, carrying on that tradition in his family. And it, like you referred to before, it kind of tells, by them interjecting him into Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it kind of tells the story of those untold stories in real history, like the Tuskegee experiment, or the Tuskegee Airmen and the Harlem Hellfighters. It kind of throws back to some real history, different history points that haven't been told. And so them tying that Truth comic and the events that happen in there with Isaiah to this new series, and then, like I said, dropping a little hint in there with the grandson, who was the one that opened the door and talked to those guys. He becomes Patriot, and you can kind of see that in some of the Marvel comics and in some of the cartoons that they have on Disney. But the whole series, I was ecstatic about it, and I had to agree with you. I had to fight back some tears. My wife wasn't watching us at the end, so. And if you can get that out of me, you done some excellent writing.
I liked Isaiah Bradley. I was surprised they used it, but at the same time not, because it's a good question. I mean, the whole question of Isaiah Bradley was, could a black man have been Captain America in 1940? I mean, that's really the answer. Cap disappears in 1942, the same year that they performed their experiments. What they were trying to do was to recreate the super soldier serum. They took 300 soldiers, 300 black soldiers, injected them with the serum, sent them out on missions, and one after another, they self-destructed. They either died horribly or exploded or they're melted down, whatever the horrible thing that happened to them. And I know that that's the goal of that, is to make us aware that the real US government did horrible things to people. And it's, even though it's history, you'll be surprised how many people don't know it. And so that they brought Isaiah in, they brought in the issue of 30 years of experimentation. They brought in the idea that he was taken to jail. He was railroaded into prison and then kept there as a lab animal for 30 years. Now, you know how strong Captain America is. So what kind of horrible things did they do to him to keep him locked up successfully for 30 years? It boggles the mind. So Isaiah Bradley, presented by Carl Lumley, he was emotionally rich. He was emotionally satisfying. He spoke hard truths. Let's face it, it's a hard truth that Captain America is an ideal, is a hard ideal for people of color to deal with. And I know so many of my friends who are like, death before Captain America. I would never be Captain America. Of any hero, he is the last one I'd ever be. And I disagree, because I believe that my ancestors built this country. So if anybody's going to be Captain America, I'm going to be Captain America, because I made this. And so I never want, and I even wrote an article saying that same thing. I am Captain America, because I believe that we, as people who worked hard in this nation, deserve every bit of recognition to represent this country. Steve Rogers did his time. He handed it off, and it's good that we now get to see America represented as it is, as a nation that's growing more brown, more diverse, more minorities, and wanting the same representation as everybody before it.
Again, I don't know the comics, so this is my introduction to Isaiah here. And besides just agreeing with what everybody else has said, I think that this was not an experience that I can personally relate to, but I can recognize the erasure that is part of history, that it's the erasure of so many people of color who have contributed, like you said, who built America, who built this country. And I think that seeing Isaiah was a really important pathway to understanding rage and to understanding that anger that we see happening today. We see them in protests, we see them on the streets, and can you really argue with it when you saw that? That to me is the way he portrayed it, the emotion. It just, yeah, it was real, and it made me ashamed, and that's okay.
We had an interesting comment from Lauren in the chat. Her input is, each of the major characters in the series seem to represent an entire different segment of humanity. The story shows how the segments clash and eventually change each other. And that's some really good insight. Thank you, Lauren, for contributing that. That's great. So, gosh, we've only got about 10 minutes left. So I wanted to ask about John Walker. He got a lot of hate online from the fans out there, and in watching the series, thoughts are going through my head. Are they trying to portray him as a villain or an anti-hero or misunderstood? What are your all thoughts about John Walker and his role in the series?
There was a really interesting article just from the sense of the costuming and how that really affected our first reaction in that initial pose where we see him, and the way that the shape of the mask and different things kind of affected that, because I was surprised at what a visceral FU response I had to him showing up with that shield in that moment. I was pissed, and I couldn't understand why. I think his arc makes sense. I think it's tragic. I think he had a moment of redemption, of possibility, when he was fighting with Sam and with Bucky at the end, and then he threw it away. And I think that's part of the hubris of thinking that the world revolves around you. and being raised to think, you know, being trained, it's kind of that programming in many ways. He, in some ways, is just as programmed as the Winter Soldier was. And I think this goes back to Thaddeus's original point about soldiers, and we train them, and then we expect them to just suddenly be great PR people and to show up on the chat shows and to not do the job. And I think he was trapped in a lot of ways. And I'll be interested to see what happens next with that character. And I'm trying not to hate him as much as I did originally.
Well, he came the moment when, and I'll also agree with Thaddeus' earlier points. I was thinking the same thing when he was talking about the Winter Soldier. I was like, well, that's John Walker's journey too, except it's a little different because he was held up as the positive of what a soldier becomes and those things, but still with the same type of coming back and having, in the hardest of situations, being held up, you know, you're killing many people and being trained and programmed to do those things, but, you know, at the end comes home and has it, but it doesn't leave you. The same, the moment he has when he's talking to his a friend in Psychic about, you know, would you take the serum? And he's like, it only gives you power, and it makes you like alcohol or anything else. It'll just amplify what you already are. And he says, but didn't we do horrific things to get all those medals? You know, and it did. In that moment, he felt justified in seeing his friend killed to then exact revenge, because it was okay. He had been taught that's okay. When they've done something to you, you can do something to them. But what does that mean? So there's so much, like you said, Crystal, that put him in this space of he is the villain, and you want to see him as that. But in that moment, when he had that comment of talked about the things that he had done and the position it put him in, I felt sorry for him, because it's true. It's still, he's in that gray space of thinking he's doing things for the right reasons, but they're still bad in it. And that's where he is. And when he did what he was taught to do, he was then cut off because he did it in the one way that wasn't approved. So then it was bad because this doesn't work for us. This makes us look bad. You know, we can't hold that up. We can't give you the medal that puts a stamp of approval on the same things you're doing when you do it in front of everybody's iPhones, and that now it's bad. And so I'm interested to see where he goes from here on out as U.S. agent and what that means, and how he can then, if they do continue more with U.S. agent in a meaningful way, how they can make it better now. He came back at the end and he helped, you know, he was there in the last moments, but you know, what does that mean going forward for him as a character in this world of miniseries as we go on?
Since I keep coming from the comic aspect, if you want to see the Cliff Notes of what's possible, just read the comic book because he has that whole thing going on there. I mean, these comic books are actually, the comic books are all being realized in the movies. So if you want to see a preview of what's possible in the movies, check the comics out. But this character to me was really tragic. It shows you, it kind of outlines someone not quite able to cut the mustard. He had ample opportunities to change, but I think he was a bit narcissistic, because every time before he made a bad decision, someone tried to talk to him and say, no, don't do that. Please stop. But he kept on without taking any input. And sometimes in our own lives, we're like that. We're so dead set on what our goal is that we don't take the time to listen to any input on how to handle situations. So it shows you the tragedy of, you know, not listening to others. No one has all the answers. So it will bequeath you to listen to some wise counsel in different situations.
John Walker is not the hero, but he is also not the villain. He is a soldier. He did what he was told. He did what he was trained to do. And when they put that uniform on him, they gave him the wrong expectation. He was under the expectation that he was going to represent America and its military might. And as such, his problem-solving abilities were directed toward military-style solutions. If they wanted a PR person, he wasn't that person. And someone in the government should have acknowledged that. Now, in the comics, John Walker goes through pretty much the same transformation as a guy the government hires to be Captain America, who then later shames America, and then America is like, ugh, you're awful. You're awful in the public. In the private, however, you still have some use. So how about we make you U.S. agent? You give Captain America back to that other guy that actually knows how to do it. And when we need somebody that gets punched in the face with 10 tons of superhuman strength, we'll call you. And that's how he gets a job. So his future in the Marvel Universe seems insured, because I'm betting the Thunderbolts will eventually show up. And when they do, he'll be there, because that's the kind of job he's doing. It's the kind of job he sees himself doing, fighting for America, even when America doesn't want him. And it doesn't.
So as we're wrapping up our time's coming to a close, I really want to just kind of get your thoughts about what's coming next. They have announced that there will be another Captain America movie with Sam at the helm. I think they're bringing in the showrunner for this series to be the people behind that movie, which is great. So yeah, what are your thoughts? What's coming next? What would you like to see come next?
Everybody's
Okay.
shy. I'm not shy. I want more Sam as Captain America. What? Is that like a trick question? I want more Sam in a costume, doing his thing, being heroic, looking good, sounding good, promoting and supporting America just like he always has. And I don't see anything wrong with it. So I hear Steve Rogers is going to appear somewhere. I don't know if we're going back in time or, we're going to see a parallel universe, Steve. I don't care, as long as he doesn't take my boy's job. Captain America should belong to the Falcon for at least a little bit longer. And at the end of this, if we change that or we have a different feeling about it, great. But right now, Sam Wilson is Captain America. Get over it.
Somebody named Chris K in the chat said they want more Baron Zemo dance moves. I just felt like we should contribute that.
I will say this, I don't have any expectations. I didn't know what to expect when these series came out. I have been completely blown away. So I am happy to stock up on the popcorn and just sit back and see what happens.
Awesome.
All right, I just want to just keep the party going. Everything that I've seen so far has been fantastic. And if they give us 3 or 4, probably not 4, if they give us 3 more hours of this, I'll be grateful. I love it.
I'll
More,
say
please.
Oh, sorry. I'll say the same. I was not expecting what I got out of this series. I'm very excited to see what comes next. And a quick shout out to the Dora Milaje. We didn't get to talk about them and their appearance in this series. But they came in, they kicked butt, took names, yes. And they showed how much they could have done, because they could have taken the shield and they knew how to detach Bucky's arm. So they have they use what they need to use, and they have more that they can do.
I wish we had time.
Cheat codes?
Yeah, she had the cheat code.
That's exactly what they were.
Yep.
Falls off. That's a cheat code. I mean, that was beautiful. My favorite scene in the whole movie. Yep. Like, wow, this really? Et tu, Dora Milaje, et tu.
Oh, that's great.
I wish we had more time to unpack the whole they weren't even super soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, painful line. That line hurt. It hurt me, and I wasn't even getting my butt kicked. It hurt. It was painful. It's like, damn, brother, you right. They're not even super soldiers. They just clowned you with old-fashioned skill. Damn.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it looks like our time is at an end. It's 8:30. Thank you, panelists, for participating, for your insight. What a great series, and I really just appreciate your contributing and just bringing up some great points. Lauren H. says, thank you very much. It's been a great con-style panel. Chris K. says, onward to Loki. Lauren also wants to see where Sharon Carter's character is going to go in the future. Mm-hmm. Whole nother layer there, but
Sharon Carter is not the power broker.
Okay.
I'm just saying, so we all, when you see it later and you go, but I thought, no, I'm telling you, she's not the power broker. You now know.
Okay. But again, thank you all very much. And thank you everybody in the chat for listening and for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and look for more of these RoberCon panels coming in the future. And I guess that's it for tonight.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
It
all.
was
Thank you, everybody.
This was
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.